الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الغرر الميامين سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا وولي أمرنا مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة الحجة ابن الحسن العسكري فداه أرواح العالمين. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As you know, tonight we celebrate the birth of our second Imam, Imam Al-Hassan Al-Zaki Al-Mushtaba, the grandson of the Holy Messenger of Allah. May God's peace and blessings be upon them. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be amongst you celebrating this incredibly festive event and speaking of the merits and virtues and impeccable qualities of Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam. After all, it is the holy month of Ramadan, and the most blessed month of the year just so happens to coincide with the birth of Imam Al-Hassan in the middle of this month. Just as we transition into the next phase of this holy month and get ready for the critical and pivotal nights of destiny, the nights of supplication and prayer and repentance, it's a very fitting occasion to celebrate the birth of Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam. And so tonight I'd like to talk a little bit about this great Imam and try and seek some moral teachings and lessons from the life of this blessed godly man, inshaAllah. Recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Al-Shaykh al-Saduq, in his famous book Al-Amali, narrates a tradition in which the Holy Messenger of God is quoted as saying to the Ahlulbayt, Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam then narrates, Kan al-Hasanu alayhi salam أعبد أهل زمانه وأزهدهم وأفضلهم. He says Imam Al-Hassan was the most devout of the people of his era, the people of his time. وأزهدهم, and he was the most ascetic, meaning the one with the least attachments to this world, the one with the highest level of disregard to the pleasures and transient joys of this life, وَأَفْضَلَهُمْ, and the most virtuous of the people of his days. In a nutshell, this is who Imam Al-Hassan was. Then the Imam says, Imam As-Sadiq, our sixth Imam, he says, وَكَانَ إِذَا حَجَّ حَجَّ مَاشِيًا وَرُبَّمَا حَافِيًا. Listen carefully. He says Imam Al-Hassan used to perform the pilgrimage to Hajj from Medina to Mecca. Now the distance between the holy city of Medina to the holy city of Mecca is roughly 450 kilometers. That's about 250 miles. Imam As-Sadiq says that Imam Al-Hassan used to perform the Hajj, but in doing so, he would always walk. He wouldn't ride from Medina to Mecca. وَرُبَّمَا حَافِيًا, and every once in a while he would walk with bare feet. Now just so lest anyone think that Imam Hassan would walk, and often with bare feet because he couldn't afford a ride, Imam Sadiq explains, he says, وَكَانَتِ النِّيَاقِ أَوِ الْمَحَامِلْ تُسَاقُ بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ. He would have camels loaded with what a traveler might need, and horses ready to take travelers with them, riders along with them. They would walk right before him, meaning that Imam al-Hassan had a ride. He chose not to use it. وَرُبَّمَا حَافِيًا. This is the part that baffles me, to be honest. It's where Imam al-Sadiq says that he would often walk bare feet. If you've ever been to Mecca or Medina, you know that the rocks, the rough terrain around the holy city of Mecca is made up of granite stones. These beautiful black granite stones that you sometimes see in kitchens. The entire terrain around the holy city of Mecca is made up of granite. Meaning that if you walk on top of these rocks, they're so sharp, they're as sharp as a knife. If you walk with bare feet, you cannot help but end up injuring yourself. And yet, that's what Imam al-Hassan did. Because when you love God, you will do anything to express that love and devotion you have toward Him. And in this case, Imam al-Hassan would demonstrate his love before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his unwavering deep connection, that visceral connection with God through this act of devotion. Not only does he walk to perform the pilgrimage, but he walks with bare feet. And so many things would happen along the way. Imam al-Hassan, according to some narrations, performed this 20 times. According to others, he did it 25 times in his lifetime. Incredible, brothers and sisters. And yet, there are those out there who unfortunately choose not to go to Hajj, not to perform the pilgrimage, even though they satisfy all the conditions. Brothers and sisters, this is an obligatory act. It's a pillar of our faith. To perform the pilgrimage to the house of Allah is not something that Islam came up with. Every religion has some form of pilgrimage. Every religion. I went to the church of Our Lady of Fatima in Portugal. And the day I went there coincided with a very big annual Catholic feast where Catholics from around the world would perform the pilgrimage to the church of Our Lady of Fatima in this far-flung village in Portugal. And there were thousands upon thousands of people who were there from across the globe. And the way they would walk to the actual altar at the center of the church, which is beautifully decorated, beautifully constructed, the way they walked is that they would walk on their knees, right? And there was quite a sizable distance, I would say, where they would sort of crawl on their knees or crawl on their chests before they got to the altar and sang praises of the Virgin Mary. It was a beautiful sight, honestly. My point is that almost every divine religion has some kind of pilgrimage as part of its rites and rituals. This is ours. If you have the ability to go, and there are people out there who are like this, unfortunately. If you have the financial backing to do this, if you tick all the boxes, which scholars have talked about, you can refer to manuals of Islamic rites and rituals to know whether or not this applies to you, and choose not to go, you don't know what you're missing out on. You don't know. Anyway, Imam al-Hassan used to do this, and a lot of things would happen over the course of the pilgrimage. As I said, over 250 miles, done 25 times. You can imagine many people coming into contact with the Imam and seeing things and hearing things which are truly profound. I will mention one of them tonight because I think it has lessons for all of us, inshallah. So, the Imam would walk on the main road. وَمَا مِنْ أَحَدٍ. Historians say that anyone who saw the Imam walking, as I said, sometimes on bare feet, would wouldn't be able to help it, but get off of their ride to join the Imam in his trek as he walked. So everyone would walk. And then at some point people would get tired. And so some of the people who were with Imam al-Hassan, they would approach him and say, "Oh, son of the Messenger of Allah, these people are tired. They're walking because you're walking. How about you start riding again so that they don't feel embarrassed about riding?" The Imam would say, "You know what? I will take a side road just so people wouldn't feel embarrassed about riding again, so they don't have to see me as I walked." And so the Imam would continue to walk using a side road, which naturally would be more rough and more difficult to tread. So Al-Kafi, Al-Muhaddith Al-Kulayni, Ridwanullah Ta'ala alayhi, may Allah bless him, the author of Al-Kafi, narrates this story. He says, in one of those trips, Imam al-Hassan's feet were so swollen that he could barely walk. One of the companions of the Imam approached him. He said to him, "Oh, son of the Messenger, why don't you start riding again? At least you will regain your strength and you'll be able to continue the pilgrimage without having to suffer so much pain." So the Imam said to him, "No, don't worry about me. I'm not going to ride. Instead, once we get to such and such location, I want you to go to this house." And he gave him the description of the house and the description of the person who lived in that house. He said to him, "I want you to go to that man and ask him, فَإِنَّ لَهُ دِهْنٌ, he has an oil, he has an ointment, which I would like you to buy from him. Give him the price of the ointment and do not haggle over the price. وَلَا تُمَاكِسْهُ," which is incredible, isn't it? The fact that the Imam is going to perform the pilgrimage and doing so for the sake of God. Because of that, he needs to buy this ointment, but he says, "I don't want to haggle over the price." Because at the end of the day, if the purpose of this trip is to serve God and show your devotion to God, then the last thing you want to do is to haggle over a price. And therefore, it is discouraged to haggle over the price of anything you buy while you're performing the Hajj. It's makruh to do so. If you're offered a price, either pay the price or walk away. To haggle takes away from the spirituality of it. So the Imam gave him the description, gave him the address. He went to that person's house, and just as the Imam had told him, that man came out looking exactly how the Imam had described him. He told him, "You have an ointment I'd like to buy from you." He said, "Who do you want it for?" He said, "I want it for Imam al-Hassan." The seller, that villager, he said, "Bi-abi huwa wa ummi, may my parents be sacrificed and ransomed for Imam al-Hassan. What are you talking about? How much do I want to sell this for? Please take me to the Imam." So that companion took this seller of ointments to the Imam. As soon as he entered upon the Imam was resting. He said to him, "O son of the Messenger of God, I have this ointment for you, and I will not take any money from you, but I do want a favor." The Imam said, "What is it?" He said, "An tas'al Allah." Listen carefully, brothers and sisters. He said, "I want you to ask God to pray for me," in other words, to pray that God gives me waladan sawiyan yuhibbukum Ahlulbayt, to give me a boy who is healthy and who also loves you, the household of purity and infallibility, the family and progeny of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala. So the Imam said to him, "Ud ila darik." If that's what you want, then quickly go back to your home, because your wife who was in labor has now just given birth ila waladin sawiyyin min shi'atina Ahlulbayt, a healthy boy who will grow to be one of our followers. Brothers and sisters, part of raising a good family, especially in these challenging times, in these morally bankrupt times, in this day and age, a big part of having a good, moral, ethical, righteous family is prayer. Is to plead with God and ask Him for help. Sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that it's our job to make it happen and that we're on our own. We're not on our own. Just as there is a God who creates us and sustains us and who looks after us, that God is more than capable of helping us and giving us the backing and the tools with which we can grow a good family, to have good, righteous children. Such a precious thing to have righteous children, isn't it? And so ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask God for help. Tell Him you want good kids. Tell Him you want a lineage that is righteous and upstanding and good. They say they went to one of the great scholars of the holy city of Mashhad, Ayatollah Mirza Jawad Agha Tehrani, and they told him, how is it that you ended up having children who were so good? And his response was, you think that was easy? Salha wa salha man gedayi karda. Do you know how much I begged God for intervention and help and support? For years I was begging God, I was pleading with Him. And now that I have this blessing, it's because of God's grace, not my own doing. Right? Al-Shaykh al-Saduq, I mentioned his name earlier. Many of you are probably familiar with him. Al-Shaykh al-Saduq passed away in the year 381 Hijri. Over 1,000 years has passed since Shaykh al-Saduq was alive. 1,000 years. He is the author of, he left us with a legacy that is so rich, a corpus of over 300 books. One of which is مَنْ لَا يَحْضُرُهُ الْفَقِيهِ. And مَنْ لَا يَحْضُرُهُ الْفَقِيهِ is one of the 4 canonical texts of the Shia faith. One of the 4 most authentic collections of hadith in our faith. مَنْ لَا يَحْضُرُهُ الْفَقِيهِ. The title of the book is in itself interesting. It literally translates as whoever has no access to a jurist. In other words, the book provides you with knowledge and information as to how to conduct yourself if you don't have direct access to a scholar. You don't know what to do in your life, you read this book. Al-Shaykh al-Saduq, one of his achievements was that 2 of his students, I'm sure you've heard at least one of their names. Al-Shaykh al-Mufid was one of his students. Al-Sharif al-Murtada was one of his students. This great man, his name was Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Babuwayh al-Qummi. He's known as As-Saduq, and he's buried in, guess where? Has anybody been to his grave? His shrine, his grave, is near the shrine of Abdul Azim al-Hassani in Shahraray, in the southern outskirts of modern day Tehran. He has a shrine, and people visit that shrine and they pay their respects and salute this great scholar of faith. Al-Shaykh al-Saduq, how did he come about? How is it that we have such a great luminary in our history? His father, Ali ibn Babuwayh al-Qummi, writes a letter to Imam al-Zaman. He lived in the time of the lesser occultation in Al-Ghaybat al-Sughra. Listen to this, brothers and sisters. You're not alone. You're not alone. You need help, seek it. Ask for it. It's there for whoever seeks it. He wrote a letter to Imam al-Zaman. But because there was no access to the 12th Imam, and the Imam was in occultation, he handed the letter over to Al-Husayn ibn Ruh, who was one of the ambassadors, one of the deputies, one of the emissaries of our 12th Imam. Al-Husayn ibn Ruh came back with the response from An-Nahiya al-Muqaddasa, from Imam al-Zaman, in which Imam al-Zaman said to him, you've asked for good children. سَيَرْزُقُكَ اللَّهُ وَلَدَيْنِ فَقِيهَيْنِ خَيِّرَيْنِ. These are the words of Imam al-Zaman. God shall give you 2 boys who will become jurists and who will be righteous. That's how God gave Al-Shaykh al-Saduq to his father. Al-Shaykh al-Tusi narrates that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, our 6th Imam, used to perform 2 units of prayer every night for the happiness and good upbringing of his children. It takes a lot of prayer. It takes a lot of begging. But the help is out there and it's available to everyone. If only we knew how to ask. Imam al-Sadiq used to do this every night. 2 units. The exact same way that you perform Salatul Fajr, with one slight tweak. Salatul Fajr, after Surah Al-Hamd, you recite what? Any surah that you want. Most people recite Surah Al-Tawheed, Surah Qul Huwa Allahu Ahad. In this special prayer that Imam As-Sadiq used to perform for the sake of his children to turn out good and to be happy and successful in their lives, in the first rak'ah after Surah Al-Hamd, you recite Surah Inna Anzalnahu Fi Laylatul Qadr, Surah Al-Qadr. And in the second rak'ah, you recite Surah Al-Kawthar, Inna A'tainaka Al-Kawthar. How easy is that? 2 units. How long is that going to take? 5 minutes? 6 minutes? But it's worth it. It's worth it if you end up having good children as opposed to, God forbid, something else. Of course, I'm not saying that all it takes is prayer. I'm not saying that all it takes is a couple of supplications here and a few visitations there and a few Hail Marys there. It's not that simple, of course. But a big part of being successful, especially in areas where there are so many moving parts, so many things that fall outside of your control. When it comes to giving your children a good, proper upbringing, you can be the best parent out there, but if they end up with the wrong friends, if they end up in the wrong neighborhood, if they end up in the wrong school, those are things you can't really control. Who helps you in those areas that fall outside of your control? Allah does. Now you might say, well, how do I reach the Imam al-Zaman? How do I ask him the way Ali ibn Babawayh asked Imam al-Zaman? Well, you could do exactly the same thing. Just as Imam al-Zaman was out of reach in the time of Ali ibn Babawayh al-Qummi, he's out of reach today, but you can still reach him by writing a aridha. And this is something that I've been telling people everywhere. Aridha, brothers and sisters, is a template to write a letter to the Imam of your time. You write this letter, and it could be, you could use your own words. It doesn't have to follow the exact template that's available to us. You could even Google it. It doesn't have to be that. It could be a simple letter from your heart addressed to the Imam of your time. What do you do with it then? You either throw it in the river, in the sea, or in a well. Some people have suggested that you can even send it with a traveler to one of the shrines of the Ahlulbayt to throw it right inside the dharih. When you write to the Imam, you shall get an answer. I challenge you to write to him with a problem that you have and not get an answer. Because it's all about changing the direction of your thought process. It's all about turning to him and praying for him and to him, after which you will without a doubt get a response from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyway, so it's not just about prayer. There's also a lot of hard work involved. Right? And one thing I'll mention tonight, since I have so many young people, especially on the sister side, alhamdulillah, and we have the parents as well. One thing I have to mention is this, brothers and sisters, unfortunately we've created these false idols in our heads that need to be torn down. We've created these immoral values, things that have no basis in our faith system, principles and social codes that run contrary to our beliefs. They need to be changed. For example, the idea that people who are young, right, cannot get married until they settle down, until they have a career, until they have a job, until they're able to afford their home, until they have a stable income. That is a false idol, brothers and sisters. It needs to be torn down. As long as you, whichever country you live in, as long as you don't break any laws, I don't know what the age of marriage or age of consent in New Zealand is, but in most developed countries it's around the age of 18 now, right? In the Vatican, up until about 10 years ago, it was close to 11 years old, which is weird, and another discussion for another day. But the point is that as long as you're not breaking any laws, if the law allows you to get married at the age of 18, then get married at the age of 18. Try and tear down these false idols. these false idols that your parents might have, or you yourself might have, that, oh no, I'm too young, I'm still exploring my options, I'm still working, I'm still studying, I'm still this or that, is a false idol. Marriage was never and will never be an impediment for personal success. You can succeed on a personal level, you can succeed as far as your career and your education is concerned, while also having the privilege of another person sharing this journey with you. Why deprive yourself of that? Why do parents still live in la-la land, thinking that young people are not being pressured, that young people are not under immense pressure at school or at university or elsewhere? Why is it that parents create impediments for their children from getting married and fulfilling this personal feat in their lives? Why? You think it's all hunky-dory out there because now you're 40 and 50 and 60. You don't know what's going on out there in the real world. You don't understand this. And I've been really harsh in my talks and my lectures around the world as to why parents have become the root cause of the misery of their children. One of your jobs, one of your responsibilities as a parent is to facilitate the marriage of your child, son or daughter. And يُزَوِّجَهُ إِذَا بَلَغْ, the Prophet says, to facilitate their marriage should they want to do so, should they want to get married and settle down. Anyway, it's not just prayer, it's not just supplication, it's also hard work, including tearing down these idols and facilitating marriage. As a family, as a community, I've said this before, communities need to establish a fund to help people who want to get married at a young age. Nowadays it's expensive to get married. People need money. Or they could need a little bit of money as a down payment to buy an apartment, for example, or a house. The community should provide that. The community should say, you know what? Here's $20,000, here's $30,000, $50,000. And it's an interest-free loan, take it. The Jewish community does this all the time. I'm amazed. I remember watching a Jewish man talk about the American economy and how he said, I'm a conservative, and as a conservative, being a fiscal conservative means that you believe the government shouldn't get involved in a lot of issues, including, for example, the public healthcare system, right? So in America, I don't know if you know, there's a huge debate about the health system in the United States and why it's so heavily privatized and whatnot. So this man was talking about this, and then all of a sudden he said, you know what? Why is it that private citizens feel like they need to have the government bail them out if they were in financial trouble? He said, as a Jew, if I ever need money, I go to my family first and then to my synagogue second. And that's it. Whatever problem I have is solved. Why can't we follow that example? Where the community comes to the help of young people who wish to get married but don't have the means to do so. Lower the dowries. I mean, all these things we can have a huge discussion about. My point is, let's facilitate. Let's make things easier. And then give the people the choice to do whatever they wish. Moving on. This was Imam Hassan alayhi salam. He made this prayer and the man got what he asked for. Imam Hassan is known by many virtues attributed to him. One of them, perhaps the most famous of his virtues, was his generosity. Kareem wa Ahlulbayt, he's called, right? He's the generous one among the household of the Prophet, even though they were all generous. But sometimes there's this quality that's overarching, right? A quality that overwhelms the individual, such that he has that attribution to him all the time. Imam al-Hassan was generous. What does that mean? It means that being miserly and stingy is what? Is immoral. It is reprehensible. It is grotesque. It is disgusting for someone to be miserly. For someone not to exhibit the qualities of Imam al-Hassan. And it's all well and good for us to talk about Imam al-Hassan being generous and giving and gracious. But I think it's important instead of us just being intoxicated by the love of Imam Hassan, to also try and adopt those qualities in our lives. Which means that if some of us, and hopefully none of you here exhibit this quality, but if there are people out there who find it difficult to give from what they have, who find themselves to be cheap and miserly and stingy, that they try and remove that trait from their lives, right? And that's what I want to talk about in the next few minutes, inshallah. In Nahj al-Balagha, the commander of the faithful says to his son Imam al-Hassan, in his will and testament, in other words, the will of the commander of the faithful to his son Imam al-Hassan, whose birth we celebrate tonight, includes this part, this portion. He says to him, Ya bunay, O my son, ajmil al-talab. Ajmil in the Arabic language means to operate in a balanced manner. It means don't overdo, don't go to extremes. Ajmil al-talab. When it comes to seeking your livelihood in this world, try and balance things out. Why? Because we all have a tendency to overdo this aspect, to overdo seeking more livelihood, seeking more sustenance, seeking a better income, having a better job and a better career. We all have this propensity to do exactly this. So the Imam is trying to temper this propensity. He's trying to get us to be more balanced in our lives, which is a disease and a sickness that I've seen all too often, and I'm sure you have too. Without exaggeration, I know at least 3 billionaires. And I can tell you, I can make a lot of observations about them, their personalities, their lives. But the one thing that stands out, is that there is no balance in their lives. With all due respect to them, all 3 are really good people. They're friends of mine. I'm not trying to slander anyone. It's the holy month of Ramadan. But let's be honest, it's the bitter truth. There is no balance in their lives. Meaning that while they have lots and lots and lots of zeros in their balance sheet, the reality of their lives is that they don't really get much time for themselves or their families. In fact, you'll notice that their children are much happier than they are. Even though the children usually, they don't have all the money available to them. They have like a monthly stipend or something, right? But the children, because they don't have the same attachment to the wealth as their parents, the children end up being happier in their lives. The parents, in other words, the ones who have earned all that wealth, you'll find them, I wouldn't say miserable, but again, there's an imbalance. There's a problem there. You can tell right off the bat when you meet them, right? And the biggest compromise they have to make, and this is what it is. It all comes down to this, brothers and sisters. Life is about making trade-offs. Life is about making compromises. You cannot do everything all the time, right? You have to make trade-offs. You want to get good grades at school, you have to sleep a little less so you can work harder on your exams and studies and so forth. If the trade-off is out of balance, if you end up spending more time sleeping than studying, you're going to end up with worse grades. That's how it works. Everybody gets it. Everyone understands. And so the point I'm trying to make is this. Imam Ali says to his son Imam al-Hassan, try and live in moderation when it comes to earning your living. When it comes to planning for your future, and of course many of you younger members of the audience know exactly what I'm talking about. When you're at school, you're all about graduating from high school. Then after graduation, it's all about university. It's all about getting that that college degree. And the whole thing, these many years, you're consumed by the idea that you need to graduate, you need to get a good job, you need to be employed in a pretty reputable firm or what have you. And all our choices that we make along the way go toward that goal, right? But the reality is, again, life is about trade-offs, which means that if you spend too much time doing this, you'll have to make sacrifices in more meaningful areas of your life. More meaningful areas, like spending more quality time with your parents, your children. When we're young, we spend all our time studying and working. For those of us who are more serious, the nerdy types. We spend so much time on school and then work, and before we know it, our parents are so old and we've missed out. People usually talk about how parents feel like they've missed out on their child's upbringing, but children miss out on their parents and the time they could have spent with their parents. Before you know it, the parents are too old and you're already thinking about, oh, do I put them in a nursing home or not? Already we're planning as to what we're going to do with our parents when they're too old to function properly and independently. How pathetic is that? Brothers and sisters, you're making compromises and trade-offs all the time. Make sure that the compromises you make are worthwhile. When someone is stingy, what happens is that their lives are consumed with money. That's why we have so many narrations from the Prophet, from his household, that are quite shocking actually. So one of them says, لا راحة لبخيل قط. A stingy person will never find peace. Why? Imam Ali answers. He says, عجبت للبخيل استعجل الفقر الذي منه هرب. I'm amazed at the stingy person, how he lives the poverty that he's trying to escape. Think about this for a moment. A stingy person is stingy because they feel that if they give away too much, they'll end up with less, meaning that they'll become poor. That's the logic. Imam Ali says, I'm amazed how a stingy person not only refuses to give to others, but he or she will often refuse to spend on themselves as well. So they end up being the poor person that they were trying to avoid. And I've seen this. I was reading in the life of Warren Buffett. Has anybody heard that name before? Warren Buffett, one of the world's richest people. Berkshire Hathaway, the guy is big. If he says you should buy a stock, everybody rushes to buy the stock. I was reading about his life and it's pathetic. No offense, but it's pathetic. He still drives his 1974 Oldsmobile. He still lives in the same house that he bought when he first got married to his wife. He still sits on the same couch that's like 50 years old. His children all work and they earn a living. One of them is a school teacher, the other is a musician, the other is this and that. And they're like, our father doesn't give us anything, right? And he signed a pledge with Bill Gates to give all of his wealth to the poor and destitute after he dies. I think that's because he's stingy. The fact that he signed that pledge is because he's stingy. Again, I'm not trying to judge him, I'm just trying to analyze. You have billions upon billions of dollars. You refuse to spend it on yourself. You refuse to spend it on your children. And you're like, once I die, I will then give it to the poor. Because at that point, I can't really control it. It's a waste. I can't do anything. So let's just give it to someone. At least I can have my name carved on some wall somewhere. It's pathetic. عجبت من البخيل استعجل الفقر الذي منه هرب. Imam Ali says, we have a hadith that says, لا راحة لبخيل قط. I mentioned that one. البخيل بعيد عن الناس بعيد عن الله قريب من النار. A stingy person is far from people. No one stands a stingy person. No one likes them. Far from people, far from God, the hadith says, and close to what? The fires of hell. In other words, a stingy person might be willing to give up those closest to them And because they're stingy and miserly, they avoid fulfilling their social duties towards those who are poor and destitute, so they are the closest to the fires of hell. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And that's why, brothers and sisters, let me take this moment and say this. It's the holy month of Ramadan. And in this holy month, the idea of fasting, ثَمَرَةُ الصِّيَامِ قِلَّةُ الْأَكْلِ, the hadith says. The fruit of fasting is to eat what? Less. Whereas I believe, I could be wrong, if you actually count the amount of food that's bought and consumed in the month of Ramadan, is it more or less than other months? Definitely more. But it doesn't add up though, does it? Makes no sense. We fast, I mean, sure, in this part of the world you fast for like 4 hours, right? Cry me a river, boo-ha. But like we fast, you avoid eating and drinking and whatnot, and then we end up eating more? ثَمَرَةُ الصِّيَامِ قِلَّةُ الْأَكْلِ. Part of the reason we fast is to think of those who are less fortunate, those who have no food on the table. I am not exaggerating, brothers and sisters, when I say that there are Afghanis in Afghanistan as well as Iran, and there are poor people in Iraq and elsewhere that have no food on the table in the month of Ramadan. I'm not asking you to give me or anybody else the money. Help your own family members. Think about your cousins. Think about your aunts and uncles and whatnot. Distant family members back home. Think of them. Let's not be stingy. Alhamdulillah, inshallah, none of you here is. But let's think of them a little bit more. Extend a helping hand. To be generous is such a great value in our religion, brothers and sisters, that the hadith says, Hatam al-Ta'i, who was known for what? Everyone knows. In Persian culture, in Arabic culture, Karama Hatam Migan, Hatam al-Ta'i was what? Was a very generous man. He lived at the time of the Prophet, our Prophet, but refused to believe in him. Which makes him what? Which makes him a kafir. He refused to believe in the Prophet of Islam, the final revelation. So he dies as a disbeliever. True? It wasn't like he was a Christian before, or any other religion. He was just an idolater. Didn't believe in anything. And yet we have a hadith that says that Hatam al-Ta'i will not burn in hell because he was generous. Because he was generous. So that generosity is such a great moral trait that God rewards those who have this trait and who have this virtue, even if they have no faith or no belief in their hearts. Right? As-Samiri, who was the person who built the golden calf for the Israelites, the people of Israel, the people of Moses. You all know who he was? You all know that he was the reason why the Israelites were misguided. And yet, when Moses got back from the mount, Imam As-Sadiq says, when he came back, Moses brought Samiri, he summoned him, and he said, why did you do this? How did you do it? He interrogated him, he debriefed him, and then he said, now I shall punish you. God then revealed to Moses, he said, Samiri, you should let him go. Don't punish him. He said, why? He said, because he's a generous man. He was a disbeliever. He was an evil person. And yet, because of his generosity, God said, spare him. Generosity is a great trait, brothers and sisters. Let's try and adopt it. Let's try and fulfill this, inshallah. Now, Imam Hassan alayhi salam was so generous that when he was dying, it is said that they came to the Imam and they noticed the Imam was crying. So a man said to him, O son of the messenger of God, you gave away so much in your life that, number one, قَاسَمْتَ اللَّهَ مَرَّتَيْن, twice in your life, or three times in your life, you divided your wealth in half and you gave away one half in the way of God and kept one half to yourself. And You did that 3 times, and twice in your life, خرجت من مالك مرتين. You gave away everything you had in the way of God. You did that twice. And yet you're crying? What are you crying for? You're going straight to paradise. So the Imam said, أبكي لفراق الأحبة وهول المطلع. I cry, number 1, for leaving my loved ones. A human being cries after all. You see your children, your family, you're leaving them all behind. And number 2, وهول المطلع. Out of the sheer grandeur of what I'm about to face. Death has grandeur. Death has gravitas. Death is one of those things that you don't joke about. And so even Imam Hassan says, the grandeur of death has overwhelmed me. Imam Hassan is the same person. إِذَا ذُكِرَ عَنْدَهُ الْمَوْتِ بَكَى. Whenever they mentioned death to him, he would cry. Whenever they mentioned resurrection for him, he would cry. Whenever they mentioned facing God on the day of judgment and reckoning, غُشِيَ شَهَقَ شَهْقَةً غُشِيَ مِنْهَا. He would scream and then fall unconscious. Scream and then fall unconscious. How, you might ask? Isn't he infallible? What's he so afraid of? Well, the answer is in Surah Fatir in the Holy Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, see if you can memorize this verse, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. Those who are learned, they fear God. Have you ever been to a place where, say for example, you visit someone who's important and prominent, let's say, I don't know, the president, prime minister, or a marja', or some great scholar, and you take along your child with you, right? The child starts running around and playing and just goofing off, right? And you're there sitting politely, respectfully, thinking, what are you doing? You try to calm down your child, but the child just doesn't get it. That's how we are. In the presence of God, we're like this child who doesn't know what's what. We don't appreciate the fact that the creator of the universe will one day stand us up and question us for everything we've done. It takes some contemplation to begin to appreciate that one day God, who created this cosmos, this seemingly never-ending universe that's made up of so many, just the other day I was reading the revised number of galaxies and stars in the universe, and it baffles my mind. 2 trillion galaxies in the universe, in the observable universe. Not all of it, just the part we can see. 2 trillion. In each galaxy there's an average of 2 trillion stars. The creator of all of this will one day question me and say, what have you done? Why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? Imam Hassan would scream and fall unconscious whenever he was reminded that one day he will have to face reckoning. Now I'll wrap up with this, and I apologize for taking so much of your time. It is the first night, and we wanted to keep it light, inshallah. But one day, there's a scholar who lives in the holy city of Qum. His name is Mirza Qummi, great scholar. And because of his prominence as a scholar, as a marja', Fath Ali Shah Qajar, who was the king of Iran at the time, had a good, cordial relationship with him. So he would visit Qum, the king would visit Qum and come and see this great scholar. By the way, one thing I need to mention is that we have 2 kinds of scholars. You have one who uses his position of authority and position of scholarship and prominence in order to seek nearness to the rulers and the governors and whatnot, right? In order to have a little bit of what they have.
right? And so you'll see them singing praises of their rulers and using words of flattery to be invited to the royal courts or what have you. Can I have some water, please, inshallah? So that's one type. The other type of scholars is the type that maintains a relationship. I didn't see that, thank you. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. They maintain a relationship with the rulers of the time for two reasons. Number one, to ensure that the community is safe, to give their words of advice, and just try and guarantee the welfare of their community. The other reason is to actually counsel those rulers and to advise them so that they would personally not deviate. In this case, Mirza Qummi was one of these scholars. He had a relationship with Fath Ali Shah, but it was in order to maintain the safety and security and welfare of the community and to also advise him every once in a while. Which is why they were very harsh with these kings and rulers every once in a while. So for example, there's an incident where Fath Ali Shah is spending a lot of time and getting closer to Sufi mystics. So Mirza Qummi writes him a letter scolding him and saying that when it comes to you being a king, be a king, I don't care. But when it comes to matters of religion, you have to consult scholars as to what's right and what's wrong. He said to him, read the books of Allama Majlisi, right? Don't do things on your own accord. Read the books of Allama Majlisi to know who is worthy of being brought close to your court and who isn't. Anyway, one day, I'll mention the full story because I think it's beautiful. Fath Ali Shah needs to see Mirza Qummi. So he goes to Qum. When he arrives, he's told that Mirza Qummi is not at home. Rather, he's taking a bath. And you know that back in those days, and even until now in some countries, you have these communal baths where people go and they didn't have showers in every home, so they would go and take a bath together. So they tell him that Mirza Qummi is at the communal bath, hammam they used to call it. He says, you know what, I'm in a hurry, I have to see him, so I'll just go to the bath. But in order to step into the bath, because it's all wet and there's water and there's fountains and whatever, you have to take your clothes off and you wear what we call izar and mi'zar, right? Which is basically you cover your body with just two pieces of cloth. So he did that, he entered, and there's a lot of steam there all the time, so it's difficult to see people. So he said, Salamun alaykum Hajj. Mirza Qummi said, Alaykum as-salam, who is this? He said, Fath Ali. Aghajan Fath Ali. He said, which Fath Ali? Fath Ali, the masseur, the guy who's to give massages to people? He said, no, what are you talking about? Fath Ali Shah, the king. Mirza Qummi, of course, knew who he was. He said to him, oh, are you the king? He said, yes, I am. He said, what part of your kingdom do you have with you? He said, whatever you want. Oh, John, whatever you say. I have an army, I have money, I have authority, I have whatever you want. Just say the word and I'll give it to you. He said, no, I'm asking you, what part of your kingdom and authority do you have with you right here, right now? He said, right now I got nothing. All I have is these two pieces of cloth. He said, well, remember that, Fath Ali Shah. You will be taken to God the same way. Your money, your kingdom, your authority, none of that you'll be able to take with you into your grave. You'll go to God, you'll go to face God the same way. So this is how the relationship between these great scholars, like Allam al-Majlisi and the Safawids as well, was something similar to that. Anyway, one day, Fath Ali Shah is sitting in the palace. He receives a letter. Who is it from? It is from Mirza Qummi. He opens the letter, then frowns. He's angered, he's upset, he goes through multiple emotions. His aides and advisors say, what's going on? What happened? He said, well, I just received this letter from Mirza Qummi, and in it, you should read it for yourself. He gave the letter over to them. They read it. And in it, Mirza Qummi said this. He said, you know what? We've known each other for quite some time. However, there is a hadith which says, Al-mar'u ma'a man yuhib. A person is raised on the day of judgment with whomever they love. And so just in case, I want to tell you that I don't love you, I don't know you, I want no relationship with you, lest I be raised on the day of judgment with you. You're an immoral person and you know it. These people weren't the most pious people who prayed Salatul Layl all the time, obviously. He was a king. So Mirza Qummi is telling him, just in case I die, I want to make sure that we're on the same page, that I want nothing to do with you. Fath Ali Shah was very upset. He got up, he said, let's go straight to Qum. On the way to Qum, he received news that Mirza Qummi had passed away. He still went to Qum and he participated in the funeral and whatnot. Then, just as they were about to lower the body of Mirza Qummi into his grave, Fath Ali Shah showed up. He started speaking to Mirza Qummi. He said to him, Mirza, you abandoned me, and you have every right to do so. You said you want nothing to do with me, but I will never abandon you. I won't let you go. On the day of judgment, I will cling on to you, and I will ask God in your name to forgive my shortcomings and my mistakes. Now, why did I mention this story? Because one day Imam Hassan is sitting down, and I'll wrap up with this. One of his ghilman, meaning one of his servants, comes and notices that the Imam is sitting down, having lunch. The bowl of food is right in front of him. He takes one bite, and there is a dog that's looking straight at Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, right across from him. The Imam takes one bite, and then he gives the other bite to the dog. One bite for him, one bite for the dog. One bite for him, one bite for the dog. So the servant says to the Imam, would you like me to shoo this dog away from you? This dog is bothering you. The Imam said to him, Da'hu, no, leave him. Who told you to do that? Inni la astahi min Allah. I am ashamed of God that I would eat while a living creature is looking at me with hope that I might look after them as well. A living creature has hope in me. I say, Ya Aba Muhammad, Ayyuha al-Hasan, Ayyuha al-Mushtaba, Yabna Rasulullah. I might be worse than that dog. You know why? Because the dog never commits a sin, and I do. And I might be worse than the dog. But you already said that you're ashamed of God, that a creature, a living creature, would have hope in you, lest you abandon them. And I know for a fact that you wouldn't abandon those who have come, gathered around, to celebrate your birth, to be in this festivity, commemorating this incredible occasion. People go to birthdays all the time, and yet we are here at your birthday, honoring you, sending our peace and salutations upon you. Please do not abandon our hope. Please do not leave us hanging and without the hope of you interceding for us, inshaAllah. Let's conclude with dua al-faraj, because we ask Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam to look after our affairs, to fix our problems, to basically do whatever needs to be done to make our lives better and more moral, inshaAllah. But the most important thing we should ask him, the gift, the present on his birthday, should be that we ask for the safety and security of Imam al-Zaman, inshaAllah. So let's recite this dua together. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل اللهم على محمد وآله الطاهرين